Next on the Daily Ledger, getting paid to play, the politics of turning student athletes into university employees.
The decision really came down to whether or not they can be regarded as employees under the law. And the board said they could be, that they are essentially employees.
We will examine how the NLRB decision could change college athletics forever. Also, Secret Service agents naughty in the Netherlands.
It surfaced that hotel staff tattled after it found one agent passed out in the hallway, according to the Washington Post. The trio was made up of 3 members of a counter-assault team.
The ridiculous campaign to remove the word bossy as well. Also, support for Obamacare hits a new low.
I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know what I'm going to do.
It's a sentiment many Americans may share. In the latest AP-GFK poll, support for the healthcare reforms dropped to the lowest level since the law passed 4 years ago, 26%.
Also, Rand Paul and his early and strong quest for the White House. Stand by. The doors of the newsroom are locked and the PC police are not getting in. So sit back and relax as we unfold today's edition of the Daily Ledger. Hello, everyone. I'm Graham Ledger, and welcome to the Daily Ledger. Our cover story, the politics of college sports and a potential game changer for student athletes. A ruling from a single regional director of the National Labor Relations Board could change the entire landscape for college athletics. This NLRB Obama appointee has basically transformed a group of college football players at Northwestern University into a bunch of unionized employees. This guy, Peter Orr, ruled that these players can form a union. He apparently bought the students' argument that the sport was essentially a full-time job.
The decision really came down to whether or not they can be regarded as employees under the law. And the board said they could be, that they are essentially employees. And they're saying it's clear that coaches strictly control football players, and they say that scholarships are essentially compensation, and they're compensation primarily for football services. Well, it was pretty clear that they accepted the union's arguments from the 24-page ruling on all the key issues.
Northwestern University disagrees. It says Northwestern considers its student athletes students, not employees. They will appeal. But the damage is done, at least for now. So what kind of unholy precedent does this set, and what kind of ripple effect will this decision have on every college and university campus from coast to coast? Joining me now, attorney and legal analyst Brian Watkins. Mr. Watkins, what do you see happening out of this ruling? Right now, it pertains to a private university, but do you see it possibly extending, if it's allowed to stand, beyond private universities into public universities, then possibly changing the entire landscape of universities and colleges in this country?
No, I don't. There's no way to implement that. I mean, okay, so they form a union. So what power does that union have? The power to strike? So what are you going to do? You're going to strike, you're going to forfeit games, not play because you're upset with your coaches or your president of your university. You got to be clear on why kids play football. They play football for 2 reasons. First, for themselves, for the fun of it. Second, hopefully they get a job in the NFL. And that's really what motivates the kids. It's not for pay or compensation. Right. So I don't believe the union's going to have any power to do anything. And I tell you, there's going to be thousands of kids ready to take over your locker if you want to, crossing that picket line's not going to be a problem.
So you think this is possibly just a college publicity stunt, if you will, by these students?
No, I wouldn't call it a publicity stunt, but I would say that, it doesn't really have any real legs to stand on. I mean, they're not employees. What they are is interns. That's probably a better way to classify them. What you do is you get to use the company's facilities without pay, without charge, and you get to pad your resume and hopefully get a job in that career in the future. And that's what an intern is, and that's kind of what student athletes and football players are. You're
an attorney now, but you're a former college athlete. Was it, first of all, a full-time job? Did you look at it as a job, or did you look at it as a vehicle to get an education and better yourself?
Both. I mean, you play football for the love of the game. And yes, it was a full-time job. I missed every spring break. I missed every summer. You know, fortunately, we missed every New Year's Eve because that next day we were playing a bowl game on New Year's Day. And I gave up all that stuff while my friends were out partying, have a good time during spring break. I wasn't. I was in the gym. I was working out. I was on the field. I was in my playbook. So I missed out on a lot. However, I gained a lot.
Now, when you look at treating these kids as suddenly employees, it opens up, to me, I could be wrong, but it opens up an entire Pandora's box to the universities. If suddenly they are considered employees, well, we're talking about payroll, we're talking about W-2 forms, and now with Obamacare, we're talking about supplying health care coverage. So, I mean, this can't just stand on itself. You got to imagine this thing's going to be appealed to the hilt, at least for Northwestern University and possibly by the NCAA.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're an employee, with employees' rights come employers' rights. So now what is the right of the employer? If you miss practice, do I take away your credits for graduation? Are you not able to graduate now? I mean, there's no way to implement, you know, calling them employees. I mean, like I said, they're at best interns. But like I said, student athletes, they do it for the love of the game, and they get a benefit from having a scholarship. Most players would play even if you didn't give them a scholarship.
Let's say this thing is allowed to stand, and for some reason the National Labor Relations Board, the entire board, allows this regional director's decision to stand, and then it's upheld in the courts. Let's say that happens. Might it destroy the entire fabric? It might destroy college football programs, especially at Division II and Division III schools and the like, because they're just not going to be able to keep up with the USCs and the larger schools of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, it opens up such a slippery slope. I mean, what about universities like Harvard? Very, well-respected university. You probably don't know the name of their football team. So their academics is what gives them their prestige. So now are people with academic scholarships saying, hey, well, we're employees too, and we're not going to make these great test scores and make Harvard look all good if you don't compensate us in some way. I mean, so it opens up a slope that I don't think that's going to actually ever happen.
It's surprising to me that the NLRB can put this much power in the hands of one person. Obviously, he's ruling about one school, one private university, but clearly this has ramifications beyond just Northwestern. That's surprising to me. And what do you see happening on the appeal here?
I don't think I think the appeal is going to be successful. Like I said, every school is similarly situated as Northwestern is, so, I mean, it would open up a huge Pandora's box.
So you feel that the Northwestern obviously has a decent chance in terms of the appeal?
Absolutely. You know, being a student athlete is a privilege. And, of course, you can go to school and not play football. You don't have to be a student athlete. And that's the difference between their union and a real union. In society, we got to regulate labor. Why? Because we have to have a workforce. Society requires that. But you're not required to be a student athlete. If it's too much for you and you want to focus on your studies, you're allowed to do that, like 98% of the students at Northwestern.
Yeah, I mean, they could go on strike because they didn't get spring break, right? I mean, what's to stop any of this?
Exactly. Our March Madness is going on right now. None of those basketball players had a spring break. So do they get a spring break in the winter? I don't know.
I don't know. They're going to have a nasty labor boss to get that into their contracts. Brian, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
Coming up next, former body man for the president on the recent Secret Service scandal. Plus, the gender equality agenda and the effort to ban the word bossy.
I think the word bossy is just a squasher.
Being labeled something matters.
By middle school,
girls are less interested in leadership than boys.
And that's because they worry about being called bossy.